Hello, LinkedIn Live audience. Just going to do a quick check to make sure we're live. You can hear us. Yeah, all good. Okay, so welcome to this month's live panel debate. I'll be your host, Clare Muscutt, and I'm the very proud founder of Women in CX, the world's first online membership community for women in customer experience. Just before I introduce today's topic and my esteemed guests, I'd love to know two things in the chat. First of all, where in the world are you joining us from today? And secondly, what do you think the key factors in driving CX culture are? So feel free to get involved and let's get the conversation going in the chat. But while we're waiting for a few more people to join, in the background, I've got my amazing team supporting the live stream today. So Meg's here with me coordinating the chat backstage and the technology. And Harley, you'll see popping up in the chat over on the LinkedIn page. So just to tell you a little bit more about who we are and what we do, for anyone who isn't familiar with Women in CX, or WIX as we're known, we actually started out as a podcast during the pandemic in 2020 as a platform for women to share their career stories, experiences and ideas about customer experience. And we became a startup community on International Women's Day 2021, so just over a year ago. So we designed our community together with our founding members, with our mission being to unite women across the globe to collaborate, inspire and support one another. And now, just shy of 1 year on, just over 1 year on, our community already spans over 50 countries with access to a private social media network, networking events, guest webinars, member-led masterclasses and case studies, but there's a whole load of other stuff in a resource library of exclusive content that help our members to flourish both personally and professionally. And we're really on a mission to amplify the voices of women in our industry, hence taking what was previously a roundtable discussion inside the community live to you, our audience, on LinkedIn today. So just a reminder of what we're here to discuss. Today we're talking about customer-centric culture and how to align brand, people, process and culture to deliver unbeatable experiences. So just before we start, should we have a look and see who's here and what factors you think are key in joining and driving CX culture. So we've got Sangeeta in India. Hi, Bryony from Newcastle. Nikia in the Netherlands. Anita from Kenya. Hey, ladies. Lovely to see you. Does anyone have any views on what the key factors for driving customer experience culture are? Feel free to add them into the chat now. And we can come back and ask you that question again in a second. Just to position our conversation today then, many businesses talk about customer centricity being key to organizational success. So we all know phrases like putting customers at the heart of everything we do are bandied around boardrooms and brandished on mission statements. But in reality, few organizations are as Amazonally obsessed with customers as they like to think or say that they are. In fact, according to the CMO Council, only 14% of marketers say that customer centricity is a hallmark of their companies, and only 11% would believe that their customers agree with that characterization. So, what we're trying to talk about today is why do so many organizations struggle? And as we put in the post about this event, it could be said that companies are overwhelmed by the volume of data available and lacking the organizational and operational capabilities required to align systems, processes, and technology to deliver personalized experiences. But more commonly, the greatest barrier is a lack of customer-centric organizational culture and a historic focus on sales or being product-led, which is undoubtedly pretty difficult to change. So we're asking, how can companies become genuinely more customer-centric? And we'll be asking some key questions, including how can we establish a picture of the current organizational culture? Is culture transformation even possible? Does customer centricity have to start at the top? What the role of brand is in defining organizational culture, what the connection is between organizational purpose and culture, and what the hallmarks of a customer-centric culture really are. So I'm about to be joined by a panel of expert guests from the Women in CX community who are bringing their expertise and experience to the table to discuss the challenges faced by organizations striving for better customer experiences. So let's have a look and see what's going on in the chat before I introduce our guests. So yeah, let's see. So Sangeeta saying employee experience drives customer experience. Sonia's saying that customers really are the center of everything and the belief that that's true. Brian is talking about the key for creating customer-centric culture is taking the rest of the business on the journey with you and not just jumping to potential improvements. That's a real good one. Christy is saying it starts from within the organization. If people are happy, they're going to strive to make customers happy as well. And Adriana is saying caring about people should be the first, and that includes both employees and customers. So thank you for getting involved in the chat. We can continue this, so please do continue to add comments as we begin this conversation. And yeah, we'd love to get your questions at the end of this, so we can ask the panel your burning questions too. So yeah, without further ado, it's time to introduce our CX queens for today. So we've got Thurza Shap, Naima Mwazi, and Julie Morgan. Welcome, ladies.
Hi, Claire. Thanks.
Hi. So wonderful to see you. And rather than me introducing you guys, it would be awesome just to go around the room and have the intros from you to share a little bit more about who you are, where you're based, and what you do, and really importantly, how you're connected to the subject of customer experience culture. And Thurza, as you're on my right, I'm going to go to you first.
Cool. Thanks, Claire. Lovely to be here. So my name is Thurza Shap. I'm located in Amsterdam, the Netherlands. And I learned CX on the job while I was working at KLM Royal Dutch Airlines, where I had the opportunity to actually incorporate customer experience into the company, which was quite a challenge. But I realized while doing that was really the red thread in my career, and that I wanted to continue doing that with other companies and organizations. And so in 2018, I left. I was a freelancer for a while. And after that, I started CX Unraveled together with some former colleagues. And we now give masterclasses on the topic of customer experience. But we also do lots of consultancy, including consultancy on culture. With companies in many different industries, ranging from pension funds to electric vehicle charging stations. And I'm fascinated by culture because it's not a tangible thing. And I most recently wrote a chapter on how you can make it more tangible in CX4. So that's a little bit about my fascination for culture.
You do, and we've got a podcast coming out on Wednesday featuring your points of view and perspectives on customer experience culture too. Thank you for that introduction, Thurza. So then we've got Julie.
Hi,
Same question.
I'm Julie Morgan. I am nearest London, so London's my main sort of hub. And yeah, I suppose I started out in customer experience when I was at a management consultancy called Capgemini. It's a fairly global firm, and ended up in the customer experience transformation team. And there was where I really built up the foundations around customer experience strategy and transformation and culture. So culture was a huge piece at Capgemini. I did lots of work with the culture change team there. And then after that, I went to the Telegraph, which is a national newspaper in the UK, and worked in the technology team as a product manager there. So that's where I got the sort of third pillar of product. And then was an independent consultant for about 10 years, and I've just joined Informa as their director of customer experience. So yeah, culture is super important. I think we're all agree that how we feel about culture is part of customer experience transformation.
Awesome. Thanks, Julie. And last but not least, Naima.
Hi, good afternoon. It's afternoon in Kenya. So I'm based in Kenya. My name is Naima Mwazi. I'm the founder and managing director of Content CX Consulting, customer experience consulting firm. I would say my career was shaped by my 16 years experience with Emirates Airline. I worked for Emirates Airline for the last 16 years. 2018, I came back to Kenya and founded Content CX Consulting, where I worked with different organizations. During the Corona time, actually happened, my former client asked me to come and work as a contract for about 1 year, which was a hospital. So it was a patient experience. So you can see from the airline and the patient experience as well, combining that. My enthusiasm for culture in an organization was shaped by Emirates, basically, because there was a lot of change in Emirates in terms of how diversity of nationalities were in Emirates. So yes, culture was something that I was really, really passionate about, having to see the transition in Emirates for the whole 16 years. So yes, my connectivity in CX and culture, yes, was shaped from Emirates. Thank you very much.
And you did an amazing case study presentation on exactly that in the community last week. So thank you again for your contribution, and looking forward to having you on the podcast next week.
Thank you. Yes, we'll do it shortly.
So I'm just looking in the chat and we've got some real great representation from all over the world today. So it's great to have a panel including Africa, the UK and Europe. So I think maybe that would be a good jumping off point, is to start to think about this conversation in the context of your own geography and industry background and experience. So Thursday, I'm going to start with you. Like, is there a particular perspective or what you're seeing out there when it comes to customer experience, culture and organisational culture? From the
Yeah, go ahead. I was jumping in already, Claire, but you didn't finish your question. Sorry.
Oh, no, I was going to just say what the main challenges are that are being experienced as you see them where you are from either industry or geographical perspective.
Yeah. So I think most of my experiences in the Netherlands and a little bit also within Europe, within more multicultural companies we've worked with. I would say many companies really strive to be a customer-centric or customer-obsessed, but they find it difficult to achieve that. And also, it's something which is, it's not done within a year and with 10 interventions, but it's something which you need what I call a long breath for to really achieve. So I would say in Europe, many companies are striving for it, but are struggling to figure out how exactly to achieve it. What I also see is a difference between more traditional companies that have been around for many years and newer companies, where newer companies are able to get it right from the start by hiring, for instance, much more customer-centric employees and by creating that great employee experience, whereas older companies that don't have that in their DNA, it's more difficult.
I could totally agree with that. And that kind of point around legacy employees, systems, processes, the journey to customer centricity, if it's from a historical base, can be much more difficult for sure. And Julie, kind of fascinated, obviously I live in the UK, so I know a bit more about what's going on here, but from kind of the technology and product perspective, what are the challenges that companies that have been traditionally product centric, what do they kind of struggle with the most?
Yeah, and I think I mean, it's interesting you say that, because we are so obsessed with technology and digital first and mobile first, the various phases we've been through in terms of sort of companies trying to be more progressive, is it tends to be focused on the technology, isn't it? The accessibility around being able to access whatever it is through technology. But something like, it's quite evident in companies, and I suppose I tend to end up working with the companies that are maybe a bit lower on the maturity scale, because that's where they need someone to come in and work with them. But it's evident when talking to people, when we're talking about plans for the next 1 to 3 years, and you're talking about where's your revenue coming from, and people also often talk about, well, we're going to launch this platform, or we're going to launch this piece of technology, and then the conversation says, well, have you really understood if the customer need is there for that, what that piece of technology is going to deliver, and also how you're going to make sure that piece of technology is a success, because you really understand what value it's going to bring your customers. And then, so it's sort of giving people the safety to sort of remove there's almost a security by attaching everything to a piece of platform, platform or technology. And it's sort of saying it's okay to sort of maybe put in your plans. The first step is to do some deep customer research to understand where the need is, and then we'll worry about the solution or the product. And often it's okay to bootstrap it just to make sure that that value is there and to prove it before you then invest in some technology. But people often want to put something more concrete in their plans for the years to come.
I've been fascinated, like seeing vendors talking about how to make your company more customer centric through technology now, as if like a platform or a system or a framework for measurement is going to enable you to do that in its entirety. But I guess the people aspect, and coming on to kind of ask Naima a bit more about this, it's just so intrinsically linked, isn't it? And as you say, Julie, like the actual platform selection and choice isn't after not afterthought, I can't think what the right word is, something you do after knowing exactly what your customers want and what you need to deliver for them, then selecting technology to do that, as opposed to selecting technology that the output is the experience of. So Naima, how about you? So tell us more about CX in Kenya and customer centricity.
So first of all, I speak two aspects, of course, the geographical part of it, and also the industry part of it in terms of a hospital. So basically in Kenya, there's a lot of transformation in terms of the CX in the last 10 years. I would say 10 years before, people were not very aware about customer experience and what customer experience is about. There was that notion, it's all about customer service, which service is more transactional. So the customer experience came about, of course, with the growth, a lot of things, companies coming up, a lot of competitions within organizations as well. So the growth, in terms of organizations. So how do they differentiate themselves? So yes, so they realize now the only way to differentiate ourselves in terms of the customer experience. And of course, with consumer behavior in Kenya, was that culture that nobody used to complain before. But with technology moving to the technology side, people now are more aware of their rights. Customers now in Kenya in the last 5 years, I've seen a lot of trends. We also have these Kenyans on Twitter who they're always tweeting about a product. People are always shouting out about anything that the experience that they've had with organizations on social media. So organizations have become very aware about that. I remember last Thursday I actually tweeted about NCBA, and it's a bank, and they got back to me very fast. So we actually, the consumers now are aware of where's the platform to complain and the platform to shout about. So yes, so in terms of the hospital, because I worked on a hospital for about a year, there was that notion that I'm a nurse, the medic side, the medical team, and then now the operational team. So I'm a medic, I'm a nurse, I'm a doctor, yeah? I chose this because I love dealing with patients, so there's that notion of, yeah, of course, I'm customer-centric because I like dealing with patients, but I don't realize that there's that, the customer experience, the patient experience, the whole person experience journey. And of course, with that as well, a lot of leadership non-commitments in organizations in Kenya, because everyone looks for when am I getting money? It's all about revenue. It's all about revenue. So they're very impatient. Leaders are very impatient in terms of waiting for that customer experience return on investment. So yes, they have been a challenge, but a lot of people now are aware of customer experience, and I'm part of the movement, and so many other women in CX who have joined recently in Kenya and are part of the movement. And we do have Institute of Customer Experience, which are also really campaigning about customer experience as well. So yes, we're hoping to see a lot of improvement in customer experience in Kenya.
Oh, awesome. Thanks very much for sharing that. And that's interesting in its own right, isn't it? That kind of traditional B2C models of who the customer is versus things like patient experience or captive markets, things like utilities, actually still putting the person that is in receipt of that service centrally to business and organizational strategy, and the culture within any organization either aiding or supporting that is down to people pretty much, isn't it, over technology. So I wanted to ask a bit of a potentially dividing question, and audience, we'd love to ask you the same question too. So I'm going to ask you to cast a vote whether you think customer experience culture has to be delivered top down or whether it can also be bottom up. So in the audience chat, I'm going to ask you to either say top down or bottom up. And panel, I'm going to ask you the same question. So who thinks it has to be top down?
Top down, yes.
Oh, so everyone's unanimous. No one thinks bottom up. It can be bottom up as well.
Also,
yeah.
Oh,
yeah.
We've got some fence sitting happening. Okay, so so why do you think that, Thursday? Why do you think it's kind of top down, kind of bottom up?
Yeah, I know I'm not doing the right thing here. I should have chosen for one to make it more controversial.
Well, none of you did you? So it's all right.
No, so I think what I think is really important is that if leadership sets an example. So if your management does not walk the talk or walk the walk, then people are really going to take that as an example and also spend less time and effort in doing that themselves. Mm-hmm. On the other hand, I think it's really healthy to have a bottom-up, let's say, movement of enthusiastic people who are really customer-focused, because that will give the right spirit in the organization. And when those two are able to meet, for me, that is the ideal situation. And usually when I come to a new company, I look at management and assess. So I assess, are they believers? Do they need any, convincing, or do they know, do they stand for customer experience? Are they never going to believe, because then it's going to be quite a difficult case? Or are they somewhere in the middle, and with a little bit of help and with a little bit of talking and facts and figures and experiencing things and customer experience initiatives smaller initiatives going well, can we get them to walk the talk as well? So that's a little bit how I think about it.
Yeah, just looking in the chat. So Shamim thinks bottom up only works when it's top down first. Quite a few people are on one side of the fence or the other. So we've got some top downs and some bottom ups, but it looks like in the audience is also a similar trend of saying a bit of both. Can we really have one without the other? How about you, Julie? What are your thoughts? How do you think it works?
So, well, I sort of tend to agree. I think it's both. So I think at the ground level, absolutely, we need to be able to visualize what the future looks like. So, like, what does it mean putting the customer? So part of it is like the practicality. So, what processes do we need to put in place? Like, how are we going to structure ourselves around this? What dashboards do I need to look at? So I kind of understand that I'm looking at data and absorbing it, and what insights am I going to draw, and do I know that it's going to get acted on, and how do I act on it? So I think there's a lot of stuff that needs to be put in place in the bottom, at the sort of working level, to make sure that, okay, well, you're asking me to work in this way. Well, can you enable me to work in this way? Like, if I do make an insight and I want something to happen off the back of it, can I trust that something's going to be able to be happening? Are there going to be resources available? Can I make change happen quickly? Et cetera, et cetera. But equally, when we're working in a new way, it takes a bit of a leap of confidence, doesn't it? Because we've got our secure and safety embedded in our old ways of working and our old structures. And so, we're asking people to sort of start thinking and working a different way, and it feels riskier. And I do think that's where the leadership of an organization need to sort of step in and put themselves at risk as well. So it's not like I'm asking people to make this change. So if you could just go and make that change, that would be great. We've got to really step in and make themselves, show that it's okay to work this way. And particularly when you're trying to work in a much more product focused way, when you're trying to be agile, you're trying to fail fast, you're trying to test and learn, the leadership need to show that it's okay to work that way. It doesn't always have to work. Failing is fine, as long as we learn and we move on. And I think that requires, giving everyone the confidence that's okay. And that's where the leadership have to step in, and do it for themselves as well.
It's like in the audience, we've got some agreement there with both of you. But Sarah saying we need believers at the top, but transparency for all, otherwise you won't get buy-in. I think that's an important point, isn't it? Creating buy-in. So whether it's coming top down or bottom up, the senior leadership definitely has to buy into the meaning of being customer-centric, but it all equally works the other way around, doesn't it? So it's kind of like buy-in across the board, being able to generate a level of enthusiasm and delivery across the organization, but needing the leaders to visibly be committed and demonstrating their behaviors that would
not enough. They have to be doing it. They have to be really demonstrating it.
Making customer-centric decisions or people-centric decisions is evidence of whether or not the company is truly what they say they are. But I think kind of back to the original point of, it's really easy to say we put customers at the heart of everything we do, or people at the heart of everything we do. And I think a lot of people believe it and believe that they are, but the processes and systems that are definitely not customer-centric are what prevent the frontline from being able to be customer-centric themselves. So I guess for me, the addition to that would be being able to audit the organization in terms of how customer-focused is what you do, before you ask the question, how customer-centric are the individuals within it? Because the knock-on impact of being able to improve systems and processes to be more customer-centric will lead to a more customer-centric culture in its own right. And sorry, I interrupted there. I got carried away. I'm the host. I forget sometimes I'm not actually on the panel. Naima, what were your thoughts?
Yeah, I totally agree with Lisa and Julie on a bit in terms of the bottom up. Of course, in an organization, people have to have their shared vision. But I think 70% it has to be driven by the leadership team, 70%. Why I'm saying that is because there have been people who have come who are very customer-centric individual, employees who have come very customer-centric. But because the leadership team does not live up to that CX vision, or they don't even have that vision, or they're not thinking customer first, so they don't, they won't grow in that environment. So I always give an example of a mother and a child, or a parent and a child, in terms of how do you, as a mother or as a father, how do you train your child? You train your child by living by example. So a child always look at what a mother or a father is doing, and then they follow, So yes, leadership team takes a lot of work in terms of ensuring that they're customer-centric, living the talk, and making sure that that is what they live every day, guiding the junior staff and all that.
We've got some great comments coming up in the chat. I don't know if you can see, ladies, but Tessie's saying, don't think any kind of customer centricity or culture change is possible without support, insight and buy-in from both sides. Very astute comment there. And a lot of people talking about needing at least a sponsor, like somebody in the C-suite who's the one driving influence and engagement around this particular issue. So yeah, awesome. Okay, so moving on to the next question then, I guess we'll get a bit more practical now. So ladies, you've got so much experience at having led in at these kinds of activities. How do you think we are best able to establish a baseline or like a perspective on where we're starting from? A few people have mentioned maturity and assessments. I think Thursday, you mention that? Something that you do? How does that work?
Definitely. Yeah, I think what's important is that you indeed figure out what your baseline is, and in that sense, becoming more customer-centric is really a different approach for each company. And so what we've done there, sometimes you're building up from scratch. Then it's pretty easy. Then you can focus on a number of things, and you don't necessarily need to prioritize there. But one of the most important things to ask yourself, and I would put that into the 7 different categories that I also mention in my chapter. So first is CX strategy. Is there a clear customer ambition, and do you have a desired customer experience? So do you know what you want your customers to feel when they interact with you? And having that is one thing, but what's more important is that your employees know what it is, but also know how they themselves in their role can act to establish that desired customer experience. So they're figuring out and assessing just by asking questions. I mean, just by asking a bunch of people within your company what the ambition is or what the desired customer experience is, that's going to give you a lot of information already. Usually things will differ, and that will give you the knowledge that people aren't yet aware, and that you, for instance, need to work on getting them immersed in what you want, or sometimes you even need to backtrack and create that strategy yourself. And then other topics I would look at are hiring. So how are your hiring processes currently established? Are you looking for skill, or are you looking for passion? What do you do training wise about customer experience? Leadership, we talked a little bit about that already. So how is that currently? Are they on board, or is there one definite sponsor, or do you need more? Do you have rituals in place, small tiny things which make you focus on customers on a daily basis? How is your reward system, both informal and formal? So do you for instance, pay your employees or give them a bonus if they have a better NPS, for instance, or a specific customer satisfaction score? Or do you reward them informally when they do something cool with customers? And then also sharing your progress as a company on CX. I think that was in one of the comments already, but making sure the company is aware of what you are doing on CX and how you're improving and excelling as a company and building up that capability. And looking at all those things will help you understand where you need to move faster, and where you might already have some things in place.
I remember doing a project with a client, and one of the first things we did was listen to the frontline, and their view of the culture was so different to the leadership team. Being able to find a definitive proof point of that. So we basically did a values survey that asked each level of leadership, management and frontline what they thought the culture of the organization was in terms of what it said it was and what it actually felt like. And the variation from frontline and leadership was such a stark contrast. That was a really important data point in being able to influence the C-suite in the fact that their reality was not the same across the organization. They were really like genuinely surprised by it. Anything to add to that? Any other ways that you would be able to establish current organizational culture, Julie, Naima?
Yeah, I mean, I think I'd just add to that. I mean, I've been in a similar situation where we interviewed all the execs, and they were like, "Yeah, we have a strategy around this." And we interview all the heads of the department, and they're like, "There is no strategy around this." So it's broadly different. But yeah, I mean, I basically completely go along those lines. You know, interview all the leadership, send out a survey to all the departments, and see where the misalignments are and that sort of thing. But I think from a cultural point of view, it's really important through those interviews to drive out the beliefs that are sitting in the organization, both sort of those that they're aware of and those that they aren't really aware of. And, you know, I've been in financial services organizations where sort of the summary that came out was that we don't do big change because we're terrible at it, because they were still bearing the scars of some big programs they tried to do and they'd ended up aborting them and that sort of thing. And so they're sort of stagnating. So I think it's really good to flush out those beliefs that are just sort of circulating around the water cooler that people have kind of adopted and starting to live. And just do a bit of a reality check on what the company is telling itself in terms of its capability to make change happen. And that can be really powerful to present back to an organisation.
I suppose another word that gets bandied around quite a lot is cultural transformation, isn't it? So I wondered, Julie, like kind of from your perspective, do you think that it's even possible?
So I suppose there will always be a culture. So it's a bit like if you don't set a strategy, there is always a strategy, because it's kind of the strategy is no strategy. So I think there will always be a culture. Like every single, you know, like your yoga group has a culture, and your choir group has a culture. Like there will always be a culture. So it's like, how much do you want to direct it? I do think culture change is possible. Culture transformation. I think you've shared your reservations about the use of that word. I think I like to sort of go with the idea of cultural enablement rather than transformation. I think, you know, you put everything in place and you allow the culture to follow. So you make sure people are bought into a vision. You make sure you give them the structures, the processes, the incentives, the benefits, the capability, and then you allow the culture to go in that direction. I think, you know, this sort of aggressive sound of driving a culture change through is, you know, that's kind of hard. Just like let people kind of follow the right direction of where a culture needs to go. And I think it is possible. Cultures exist whether you like them or not. And I think we do have the power to sort of influence them in the right way. Oh, we've lost you, Claire. You're on mute. We can't hear you. You're on mute. Mute yourself.
Claire's lost ability to hear anyone. So I don't know if anyone wants to chime in off what Julie was saying, but feel free to keep the conversation going.
You're going.
Yeah, sorry, I'm back now. Like that was so weird. Literally everything just cut out momentarily. But hopefully I'll be able to hear you again. Julie, I have no idea what you said, but I'm sure it was incredible.
It was brilliant. It was brilliant.
Oh, and I still can't hear you. Oh my God, I don't know what's going on. I'm going to ask the next question while I try and sort my technology out. Meg, I could hear you for some reason, but no one else. So Naima, I was going to ask you what the role of brands is in defining organizational culture. And I'm going to try and get my ears working again.
Okay. So I always say brand and culture are two sides of a coin, you know. Basically, they work together and they reflect on each other. So brand is what happens outside. It's a reflection outside. And culture is what happens inside. So when it comes to brand, and I remember giving out my case study last week for Emirates Airline, how they focus on the brand, their brand vision in terms of what they put out there. The advertisement that they did, what did they want to be known for? You know, the products that they had in terms of how do they want to their customers to experience their products in terms of it really played a lot of part in the brand identity. When it comes to culture, is what is inside. What are the values that you have? What are you promising your customers? What are they? Are you living up to those promises? that you're giving to the customers. So when you combine the brand and the culture, that is what you get the whole at CX cultural brand in terms of an organization.
And I guess from my perspective, like brands are a really important driver of defining what that culture needs to be, because ultimately customers and employees should be experiencing the reality of something that goes beyond a strap line. So a huge amount of disappointment and unmet expectations comes from brands talking about themselves in one way and then customers experiencing service in another. So so definitely a very strong link. Thursday is going to ask you kind of the flip side of this. Like what's the link between purpose and organizational values and culture? So having talked about brand.
Yeah, I think purpose is a super important thing to make sure you get that culture that you want, because people you look a lot also at employee branding nowadays. People join a company because they feel a certain purpose or because they want to contribute to what that company is achieving. You've seen also that many companies have done more work focused on purpose. So what is their purpose? They spend amounts of time and also throughout the whole company discussing what they want their purpose to be to make sure that's has a really strong foundation. And I think that is something which is necessary if you want to create a customer-centric culture, that's something which is visible in your purpose, and that's the reason why people want to work for you or remain to work for you. So I think there's a very strong link there, and if it's not, then that's maybe something which you're feeling and which you need to work on.
Yeah, I guess that's another question you could ask the frontline, isn't it? Like you said, what's our CX strategy, and see what comes back. It's asking people, well, what is our mission and our purpose and our values, and whether or not that it is felt. There's some really great comments come in through in the chat actually. Something Tess said, I think it might have been flashed up already. But yeah, you can't not have an experience. This is from Lou Carbone. It's the same for culture. Either you have one by design or you get the output of it. So like to quote someone, great customer experiences don't happen by accident, they happen by design. The same thing could be potentially true of culture. And also, what else did we have going on here? Yeah, so Adriana's asking the question, is it the ideal is that the culture will add to the brand promise then? Well, it'd be delivering the brand promise, wouldn't it?
We had an interesting case at KLM where we had a desired customer experience which was focused on we care for you. We wanted customers to feel cared for, whereas our brand promise up until that point was very we were punctual, we were safe, we were secure. So we were a little bit more, we were definitely not in that caring area. So internally we had a discussion then which caused us to really change our brand promise and also our marketing in that sense. We had different types of commercials because we wanted to move much more to that caring thing. So I don't know. I think they need to be in line, but I think they can cause a discussion, either coming from the brand perspective or from the customer experience perspective.
Yeah, a couple of weeks ago, we had Denise Leon, didn't we, who came and talked about brand culture fusion and being able to drive a far greater return on brand investment when you can connect brand strategy with employee strategy, for example, and bringing cohesion across product and service and marketing through the culture of the organization. Sorry, Julie, you look like you're going to say something before I jumped in.
Well, I was just going to say, I think, many of us have been in many organizations as employees, and you feel like there's a disconnect between the outward-facing values and how we want to treat our customers, but the employees are not treated in that same regard. It's not a good feeling, is it? You don't want to feel like you're second class we're trying to sort of keep everything in the closet internally because we want to look great externally. That doesn't really work. And I think, the focus now on making sure that the employees are, empowered, enabled to be able to deliver on the values and on the promise, because we treat our employees and internally we regard ourselves with that level of respect and wanting to look after each other. Then I think 100% that plays through. I think they're all interconnected.
I remember one particular company I worked for, and there was this kind of big brand strategic project around putting customers at the center of everything we do, the typical ones. And, you know, kind of looking to the front line to say you should be doing a better job. But when my team went in and tried to understand, well, why weren't customers getting such great responsive service? It turned out because there were so many policies and procedures that hamstrung the employees from actually using any initiative at all. That a lot of the policies were set up for the 0.01% of customers who might take the mickey around things like refunds and returns. That meant they weren't able to do what the ivory tower were asking of them. And actually it was about, you know, we talked about kind of recruitment and training, but there was also a whole load of process and policy change that had to be made in order to facilitate the change in service to actually happen. So we've got one more question to come. So audience, if you'd like to be thinking about the questions you'd like to ask the panel in a couple of minutes, we'll be able to ask those for you. Great question just came in from Rachel. I'm looking forward to asking that one. So our final question really is around like the hallmarks of customer-centric culture. So from your experience, either like working with companies yourselves, like directly as an employed, or working with them externally, what are the key hallmarks you see of great customer-centric culture?
I'll go for that.
Yeah, go for it.
Yeah, I think the hallmark of customer-centric culture should start first of all with a role model leadership. Yeah, leaders who have a vision, a CX vision, leaders who make decisions, customer-centric decisions, you know, which are focused on the customer, and also have those customer-centric actions that they do in terms of the initiatives that they do with their employees. Like Julie said, if you're a leader, how are you treating your own employees? You know, how are they? You know, treat your employees well, and it will reflect on the outside. So having that role model leadership, number one. And number two, recruiting the right attitude and mindsets. Remember, Lisa said initially, when you're talking about the top and bottom up and all that, having the right employees, yes, having to recruit the right employees, not only on skills, but the right mind and the attitude as well. The third one I would say is the onboarding and trainings. I'll always give an example in terms of Emirates. We came from different cultures. So how do you ensure that that organization has the same culture? We are all having the same culture from the beginning. So onboarding process in terms of the trainings that you have with your staff when they come in from the beginning, so that you get a standardized and consistency in terms of any service delivery that you're doing. The last one, of course, with organizations being in terms of willingness to change, because there's a lot of change coming in. Let's say whatever happened during Corona, who would have thought that we'll be working from home? Who would have thought a lot of employees will be working from home? Who would have thought that even customers will be doing things online instead of actually visiting your organization? So yes, having the mindset in terms of willingness to change in terms of whatever that is happening in the world as well.
Nice. And how about you, Thirza?
Yeah, I think Naima gave a great 4 points. I have a couple to add to that. So I would say what I already mentioned before, rituals is one thing also to look at. So what kind of rituals are there? Are there specific customer minutes? Some companies have a red chair in their meeting rooms, which signifies the customer. It sounds absurd, but it really does change the conversation. So rituals, rewards, how do you reward? Informal and formal. And also make sure your rewards don't go the wrong way and reward the behavior you don't want, because I've seen that as well. The CX strategy, yeah. So what is it you want your customers to experience, and is everyone in the company aware of that? And then sharing progress that you're making, and making sure that keeps the spirits up within the company, because it's something that takes some time.
I agree. And Julie?
Yeah, so I think fundamentally it's about whenever you're in a meeting that the customer is born in mind. So the red chair example. So that things are framed. So when we're talking about a new product or a new approach or a new revenue line, whatever it is, that somebody in the room or everybody in the room says, okay, well, what are we trying to get to in terms of the customer perspective? So is it like a happy face when they walk in the room? Is it a release of pressure because something's been answered? Like, what pain are you taking away and what gain are you giving them? And that's fundamentally bringing it down to that. And on top of that, what value are you going to give them? And how will it enhance their lives, basically?
Yeah, I agree. So I think it's time to go to the audience now. We're getting some really interesting questions. And I think Zineb's question is probably prompting what a lot of the audience are considering now. And that's regarding being able to link things like customer-centric culture back to organisational objectives and outcomes. So Zineb's asking, when some members of the C-suite are totally product focused, how can we as managers change their mindset? Who would like to take that one?
I can take that one. I think data is always a good thing. So, if someone's saying, yeah, let's go and do this product, then, we'll prove that it's going to help the customers in some way. Like, show me some evidence. It means that this will either take away a pain or enhance them in some way, and show me the value of it. So you can't, and using the customer voice as the authority in terms of understanding what the need is, and the data to back it up.
Yeah, I guess fundamentally creating a product that doesn't serve customer needs or benefit them in some way isn't going to be a financially viable product in the long term.
100%, yeah.
But being able to establish financial metrics and markers to prove that, for example, doing A/B tests is always a good one, isn't it? So creating a feature that is genuinely customer driven, or like it's going to better benefit the customer, and seeing like the difference if you have that feature or not on the impact on things like transactions and sales is always a good way as well.
I was just going to say, you're introducing risk into your investment. If you're thinking about, let's just launch this thing, it's riskier than if you say, let's go and do the research and then we'll see if it's viable.
Yeah, and buying the time and the headspace to be able to do that. But I think in my experience, it only takes a couple of times where you prove the benefit is when you start to get the buy-in. So, not trying to boil the ocean in customer experience and fix everything, being able to really drill down to a specific problem or challenge that can be answered through customer experience that delivers a commercial benefit or return is the best way to get C-suite to buy into anything like this. It's the eternal question, isn't it, for everybody? Yeah. Okay, next question. So Rachel's asking, what do we think of organizational KPIs without customer focus?
Yeah, I can go for that one.
Yeah, take it.
I think you need to look at multiple organizational KPIs, among which ones that are customer focused. But I think a customer KPI goes hand in hand with an operational KPI, a financial KPI, and an employee KPI. Because if we'd focused fully on customers at KLM, all we would have needed to do was put the price to €1, and we would have had an NPS soaring through the roof. But that would not have created a financially viable company, nor an operation system that would have worked. So I think it's important that you establish, let's say, top KPIs in each of those 4 segments and see what's happening. So if your NPS is, for instance, going down, what's happening financially, or what's happening operationally, or are you seeing things with your employees happening? So that's the way I feel about it. I think if you want to create a viable system, all those 4 things are important to look at.
And I can also add on that, and I believe a lot of people think the customer experience KPIs should focus on maybe the front-facing employees. And I've had with my engagements with my clients, I've really tried to make them understand that even if, let's say, for a production company, whatever that you're producing as in the factory manager should have a customer-centric KPI, because the end user is always the customer. So each and every department should have those KPIs, customer-centric. They might not be in that level of a front-facing employees, but I believe each and every employee in an organization should have a customer-centric KPI in it.
I mean, back to Thursday's point is about, well, it can be dangerous, can't it? Because if the customer-centered KPI is really an operational one, the wrong behaviors can ensue. And I've seen it so many times. Like one organisation I worked for was obsessed with spotting mystery shoppers, and that was the key customer metric that the stores and locations were bonused against. So they spent far more time trying to spot mystery shoppers than they did actually improving customer experience, and the results were altered by it. So if you looked at the numbers, it looked like the experience was improving, but actually they were just getting better at spotting the person that was doing the measurement, which is a challenge. But I think it's having a suite of metrics, isn't it? And ultimately, growth is the key indicator of satisfying customers, isn't it? And being able to connect customer metrics with financial metrics is the bigger challenge. But a lot of this is about understanding qualitatively, isn't it? Whether or not you're doing a good job. So feedback, social media, that kind of thing is also important. But trying to boil it down or reduce it to a single customer KPI can often make the waters more muddy. Well, about another measures question. So I don't know who asked this because it just says LinkedIn user on StreamYard, but how do you internally measure the success of a more customer-centric culture? So another measures question.
Yeah, shall I go for it as well?
Yeah, help yourself. Yeah.
I think I would say two things from my experience which have worked. So on the one hand, that maturity assessment, where you first do interviews and maybe a questionnaire throughout the organization to establish where you're at, and then repeating that, for instance, after a year or after 2 years to see how you've progressed. So, are more people really contributing to the desired customer experience? Have things been put in place? And you can measure that throughout the time. The other thing, and that's something more on a monthly basis, which I find very strong, depending on a few factors, is the employee promoter score. So asking your employees whether they would recommend this company or this department to their friends or other colleagues. And what's important there is that there's a leader within the group who is open and willing to get feedback on what needs improvement, but that can lead to fantastic conversations and fantastic improvements. And you can actually focus on specific employee cultural elements that you want to understand better. So asking the EPS question, but then asking if, for instance, people feel empowered on a scale of 1 to 10, and that leads to great conversations on how they can be, for instance, more empowered or what they need. I've also seen it in an environment where it was less safe, and then it's really difficult, to get answers, truthful answers, which you can actually act on. So that's the downside of it. But those two things I would look at.
Interesting what Lynn just said in the chat there. So best to reward preventative behaviours with a higher weighting than survey scores. Focus on people preventing issues and rewarding and recognising that behaviour. That makes total sense. Anyone else like to add to that question again? Sorry, I'll just put it back up again. How do you?
I was going to say back to your point, Claire, about growth, because ultimately, if you're, if we're thinking in terms of products and services, like if your products are being adopted and the retention is there, so and product launches or service launches are getting out into the market and adopted quicker, then you've de-risked them through really understanding the customer need. It's not like a spray and pray kind of approach where you're sticking stuff in the market and then seeing how it goes. You've done your sticky tape modeling. You've understood that the prototype works, and then it's a less risky launch. So arguably, by the time it gets to market, you're fairly confident that it's going to do what it needs to do in terms of meeting a customer need. So I think your growth around your products, how quickly they're adopted, and your reduction and retention levels should tell you that you're thinking from a customer need point of view.
Yeah, that outcome metrics is, I agree with you. I was just thinking that that kind of parallel. I was going to say, maybe you could measure like a reduction in complaints, but then I thought about Amazon, who make it so easy to complain. They probably don't have a low number of complaints, but they sort all of them out immediately. And the ones, I doubt there's that many that escalate to being a huge problem, because they just have this no quibble policy, don't they, about things like returns and refunds. But audience, I'm interested to know what you think about this question. How do you internally measure the success of a more customer-centric culture? Do you have any examples you'd like to share? I think Lynn's had another comment from Lynn again. Absolutely, every group should have a CX goal. It's based on their own cut of customer issue comments they originate. Key driver tied to an 1820 Pareto's law, root causes of their workforce causing poor CX. Yeah, that is interesting, isn't it? Being able to bring the insight forward as to where complaints or problems are happening, and being able to take that upstream to understand where the root cause of it is. Because quite often there's a disconnect, isn't there, between complaints and refunds and actual projects or programs that are designed to go upstream to figure out where the problem is. I know in my experience, like being able to host like cross-functional journey mapping sessions to do that is a really powerful way of uniting the workforce around common goals for customers. But quite often it's due to things like silos, isn't it? Departments like handoffs and handovers that are relatively easy to fix, but it isn't necessarily a problem with the product or the service. It's a problem with the process or the operation or the way that we deliver it. So yeah, just to bring this to a close now then, ladies, what's your kind of key takeaway for the audience, like a final thought from each of you around how to drive customer-centric culture?
I would say sometimes it can be pretty lonely. You can feel like an evangelist, but keep your spirits high, and you're bound to find people within your company with whom you can drive that further and structurally move forward on creating a more customer-centric culture. But it can be pretty lonely sometimes. I've experienced that myself, and you need some stamina and some time to go through that.
Yeah, a hell of a lot of grit and resilience required in customer experience change and anything to do with culture, isn't it? I totally agree with you. And Naima, what's your final thought?
And then my final thought is basically any organization, for you to get to a good customer experience culture, you must be able to align your brand strategy, align your people, in terms of empowering them, empowering your employees and all that. And then, of course, the processes and systems, working on the processes and systems, which are enablers for your employees to be able to deliver the good customer experience.
Okay, yeah, that makes sense. And I just had a point of clarification from Lynn. We're talking about workflows, not workforces, causing the root causes of the problem. And Julie, what's your final thought on this?
So I'm quite a believer in having a North Star, so understanding where you're going. So whether that's to your purpose or you do a customer strategy vision, so that people all understand which direction they're pulling in. And I think the best way to do that is from the customer's perspective. So what is it they want to feel or do or have when they've had a really good interaction with your company? I think secondly, we love the word transformation. We really love it. But I think, it's marginal gains, isn't it? Like culture is hard. Culture change is hard, and it takes time because you're literally trying to change the mindset of a vast number of people. So I think looking at moving the needle in the right direction is good, and noticing when changes are happening, because I think we can be so focused on where we're not, we forget to really focus on where we are. And there's success stories to be written off the back of that. And I had a third point. What was it? No, it's gone.
Oh. If it comes back to you, the chat will be on the post afterwards anyway, so you can
got it. So off the back of maturity assessment, also understanding where you need to get to, because you don't have to get to a 10 out of 10 on customer-centric culture. Like if you sometimes a 5 is just where you're going to be your sweet spot, and that's enough to balance the commercials, the operations, the financials, and everything else, and giving the organization time to get there, because it will take a few years.
Yeah, awesome. So thanks so much, ladies, for coming on the panel today. It was really awesome to benefit from your skills, expertise, and experience. But also a huge thank you to our audience today, who've been super engaged, who've asked loads of questions, have given their thoughts in the chat as well. It's been an absolute pleasure to hold this month's LinkedIn Live with Women in CX, and we really hope to see you again next time. So that's it for now. We'll see you soon. Bye.
Thanks, everyone.